Was it Hamilton's fault, or did Ferrari betray him from within? What Charles Leclerc discovered after the Singapore Grand Prix could change the way we view the entire 2025 season. Do you dare to know the truth? The Marina Bay circuit has always been a technical trap disguised as an urban spectacle. Under artificial lights, with abrasive asphalt and tight corners that punish any mistake, the Singapore Grand Prix demands pinpoint precision and, above all, absolute confidence in the car. For Ferrari, that trust was broken in 2025. But no one knew it, yet. Since the formation return, something felt strange about the SF25. The radios were quiet, but the way Leclerc and Hamilton approached braking was different, restrained, as if their brains knew something their engineers had not yet detected. It was between laps 7 and 8 that the invisible became evident. Hamilton began to experience a disconnection with the car, a minimal gap, imperceptible to spectators, but lethal in terms of race dynamics. With each brake, I had to apply manual adjustments to correct what I felt was a delay in pedal response. Leclerc, for his part, noticed an abnormal vibration in the rear axle. He reported it, but the order was to continue. What the team didn't know or refused to see was that they were repeating mistakes from past seasons, ignoring subtle cues, blindly trusting simulations, and underestimating the real physics of the circuit. Singapore does not forgive. With ambient temperatures exceeding 30 degrees and humidity slowing any attempt at natural cooling, the SF25's braking system was being pushed to its limits. The brake-by-wire, that hybrid technology that replaces the traditional hydraulic system with an electronic module responsible for regulating rear braking, showed alarming figures. Each time Hamilton pressed the brake, the system had to choose how much to apply to the discs and how much to regenerate into the battery. But that balance was out of range from lap 1. The software was trying to compensate. It failed, and the heat rose. No one said it at the time, but Hamilton already knew he was driving a broken car. When the accident occurred, many saw it as a distraction or human error. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was a direct consequence of a progressive buildup of heat, loss of pressure in the rear system, and a disconnect between what the driver was asking for and what the car could deliver. Braking in Singapore stopped being a physical action and became an electronic roulette. Leclerc, in parallel, reduced his pace without explicitly saying so. His smoother, more adaptive driving style allowed him to navigate the crisis with less risk, but the signs were identical. The technical fear was already sown. And most alarmingly, when the team downloaded the telemetry that same night, they found something worse than a one-time failure. They detected a pattern. A pattern that had already appeared discreetly in other Grand Prix, but in Singapore it simply became unbearable. After the disaster on the track, the real earthquake came in the halls of Maranello. Ferrari's technical team dove into a post-mortem analysis of the SF25's performance over the Singapore weekend. This was not about reviewing a simple telemetry sheet. It was a technical autopsy. What they found not only explained the Hamilton accident, but revealed an existential threat to the entire 2025 project. The design of the SF25 was born from an obsession. Ferrari had been trying to regain the throne of Formula One for years. Since the rise of McLaren and the progressive collapse of Red Bull, the Scuderia opted for an extreme aerodynamic solution. The car's flat bottom, a key piece in generating ground effect, was redesigned to channel air more aggressively than ever. The logic was simple: more load, more cornering speed. But that approach, so brilliant on paper, carried a devastating collateral problem. This new aerodynamic flow generated high-pressure zones that directly interfered with the rear brake ventilation system. Literally, the air did not reach where it should. Instead of cooling the discs, it was trapped in internal turbulence that overheated the system even more. The most serious thing is that this failure was not visible to the naked eye. Wind tunnels didn't detect it because they didn't adequately simulate the dynamic interaction of real heat under long-running conditions. Ferrari built a car that worked in theory but fell apart in practice. During the second half of the Singapore GP, that misconception reached its most critical point. The brake-by-wire system sensors began to register temperature peaks exceeding 1,200 degrees in certain phases of braking. That was no longer a warning sign. It was a sentence. At these thermal levels, the hydraulic fluid begins to vaporize, causing a sudden drop in system pressure. The pilot presses the pedal, but the response is weak or completely non-existent. An unacceptable condition at more than 300 kilometers per hour. For Hamilton, that was exactly what happened. A lethal combination of overheating of the rear braking system, poor management of energy regeneration, and an architecture poorly planned from its genesis. The electronics, trying to compensate for the impossible, introduced micro-variations of torque to the rear wheels under full braking. The result? A loss of stability that no driver, no matter how champion he may be, can control. And that was not all. The internal report also found flaws in the integration between the hydraulic system and the thermal control software. The alarms that were supposed to notify engineers were not calibrated for extreme conditions like those in Singapore. The SF-25 didn't just fail. It didn't warn me that it was failing. They were running blindly. The reaction was immediate. An emergency meeting was called with all those responsible for aerodynamics, brakes, and race strategy. Charles Leclerc participated directly. Not as a pilot, but as an active part of the investigation. It was he who demanded a complete revision of the car concept. This was not a minor correction. Fundamental parts of the design had to be rewritten in the middle of the season. Something that is not only difficult, but costly in time, resources, and above all in championship points. This structural failure completely changed Ferrari's internal discourse. They were no longer fighting over tuning the car. They were fighting to keep it safe, to prevent more collapses. What seemed like an isolated accident for Hamilton became a symbol of the price paid when the design is pushed to the limit without respecting the basic principles of cooling, balance, and reliability. When the Singapore Grand Prix ended, Ferrari had not only lost a race, he had lost credibility. What happened next in Maranello was a silent earthquake. Without official statements, without big headlines, but with profound internal repercussions that marked a before and after in the management of the team. Fred Vasseur understood that he could not minimize the problem. The pressure came from the top, from Ferrari's executive management in Italy, where shareholders and managers were not willing to tolerate another year of broken promises. What seemed like a technical failure became a symptom of something much more serious: the disconnection between the design, simulation, strategy, and on-track operations departments. Ferrari had evolved technologically, yes, but not as a team, and you pay dearly for that. In this climate of mistrust and urgency, Charles Leclerc assumed a role that no driver had occupied at Ferrari since the days of Michael Schumacher, becoming the direct link between the car, the driver, and the core of technical decisions. He was no longer just a fast driver. He was an internal auditor. It was Leclerc who requested direct access to the aerodynamic development reports. It was Leclerc who brought together his group of engineers to cross-reference real data with simulations and understand why decisions made in the wind tunnel did not work on the track. His level of involvement surprised even veterans of the team. During a private session at Maranello, Leclerc reviewed the Singapore GP lap by lap with the heads of aerodynamics and cooling systems. He didn't do it from ego, but from a clear conviction. If he didn't understand 100% why the car behaved like that, no one else could translate that data into real speed. The relationship between driver and team changed from that day. Internally, his leadership was consolidated. Several technicians began referring to him as the silent captain. He did not need official titles or political positions. His authority was born from the truth. He was the only one who had survived the technical disaster on the track and, furthermore, had had the courage to face it in the offices. For Hamilton, the situation was different. Still in the process of adapting to the SF-25, he was caught in the middle of a technical storm that he had not generated. His frustration was evident, but so was his professionalism. He took on the role of active observer, learning from the new environment, taking note of how Leclerc handled the crisis. A silent alliance was forged between the two. They were no longer simply teammates. They were survivors of the same shipwreck, and they knew that only together could they pull Ferrari out of the technical abyss. In response to Leclerc's demands, Vasseur ordered an immediate restructuring. The thermal analysis team was expanded, an external group of fluid dynamics consultants was hired, and aerodynamic development of the SF-25 was temporarily paused to prioritize reliability. A painful decision because it implied resigning competitive evolution on some tracks, but necessary to avoid another collapse like the one in Singapore. And most importantly, Ferrari activated a new cross-validation protocol between track and simulator. Each proposed aerodynamic modification had to be tested not only in the wind tunnel, but also in practical tests with reserve pilots and in a physical simulator. Leclerc would participate directly in these validations. The impact of all this cannot yet be fully measured. But what is clear is that Charles Leclerc, after Singapore 2025, is no longer just a talent behind the wheel. It is the axis of Ferrari's transformation. And perhaps, if the pieces fit together in time, the architect of a renaissance that will no longer be just technical, but cultural. Do you think Ferrari will know how to use this lesson to truly rebuild itself? Or will we once again see the cycle of mistakes, excuses, and frustrations repeat itself? Leave it to me in the comments. I want to read what you think.